NUS last spring, a 17-year-old girl took a Friday night babysitting job at the Davids house, just 5 blocks from her own home in Chandler, Arizona. She was saving up for college, and the prospect of earning an extra $20 an hour seemed especially appealing. The neighborhood seemed like a safe haven, with neat single-story homes, manicured lawns, and streetlights every 30 yards. Her parents approved of the visit. She arrived at exactly 6:30 p.m. Mrs. David showed her the alarm panel, the Wi-Fi password, and emergency contacts. She changed 4-year-old Sybil and 6-year-old Tyler into their pajamas and left a portion of cool chicken nuggets in the refrigerator. Mr. David strictly reminded her of bedtime at 8:30 p.m. without any delays. The couple departed for a charity dinner downtown. As soon as the front door closed, the girl instinctively slid the bolt. The evening passed smoothly and peacefully. The children colored with crayons, then watched only half an episode of Paw Patrol, after which they brushed their teeth. At 8:25 p.m., she took them upstairs, read a brief story about a lost puppy, and turned on a nightlight in the shape of a glowing blue LED moon. The little ones fell asleep almost instantly. Downstairs, she texted her mother, spread out her biology flashcards on the kitchen island, and poured herself a refreshing cold drink. At exactly 9:15 p.m., there was a persistent knock at the door. She startled in surprise. The Davids had not mentioned any possible visitors. Peering through the peephole, she saw a man of about 40, dressed in a gray hooded sweatshirt, dark jeans, and sneakers. In his hand, he dangled a key fob, and he politely waved at the lens of the entrance camera. A black Honda idled quietly at the curb. He said in a very ordinary tone, as if he were sure she could hear him, "Hey, I'm the kid's uncle, Brandon. I left my keys earlier. I want to pick something up from the bedroom upstairs." His voice was even, without pressure. However, all the internal alarm bells in her mind howled in unison. The Davids had never mentioned any brother. Through the closed door, she replied in a firm but calm voice, "The parents didn't say anything about you coming." "That's my fault," he retorted. "I assured my sister that I had a spare key. Listen, Sybil asked for her purple blanket earlier, right? She always reaches for it when she's tired, and Tyler ate macaroni and cheese before changing into his dinosaur pajamas. I know their usual routine." His words were accurate in detail. Her stomach twisted into a knot. Maybe he really is a relative. Maybe it's just a clever trick. She stepped away from the door and launched the nursery monitor app. Both children were snoring peacefully in a steady breathing rhythm. Her gaze slid to the tablet with the living room cameras. The street lens captured the man, impatiently shifting from foot to foot, but not trying to grab the handle. She dialed Mrs. David's number. No answer. The call to Mr. David went straight to voicemail. The thought of calling 911 flashed, but she hesitated. In Arizona, there is a fine for false alarms. At that moment, a message arrived. "Sorry, it's so hectic at the banquet. Is everything okay?" From Mrs. David. The girl hurriedly typed, "There's a man here named Brandon. Your brother is demanding to be let in." The screen flashed 3 dots of anticipation. Then came the reply, "We don't have a brother. Call the police immediately." Her palms trembled. She took a deep breath and dialed 911, clearly stating the address, the stranger's description, and specifying that 2 children were sleeping peacefully upstairs. A muffled knock came from the hallway. The man knocked again, maintaining the same politeness. "I really need that blanket. I swear, just 2 minutes." She said nothing. He waited about 10 seconds. The camera caught him heading to the front windows, pressing his hands against the glass, trying to look inside. The girl hastily turned off the lights in the room to remain unnoticed. In the faint glow of the phone screen, she watched him go around the wall and approached the side gate. Soon, the motion sensor in the yard flashed and went out. The dispatcher kept in touch. "A patrol will arrive in 3 minutes. Don't go out and keep everything locked." She crept silently to the patio door. The lock was secure, the curtain securely drawn. Outside there was dead silence. A heavy stillness hung in the house. Even the usual hum of the refrigerator seemed muffled. In the distance, she heard the wailing sirens of 2 police cars, which soon fell silent. Red and blue flashes broke through the blinds. The girl froze in the hallway until an officer called out to her from the porch, giving his badge number through the door. Only then did she crack the entrance open. The police officers thoroughly combed the yard and the surrounding streets. The Honda had vanished without a trace. Tire tracks stretched to the main highway. Neighboring door cameras captured nothing useful. The stranger had parked out of their view. In the house, the children never woke up from the commotion. The officers recorded her statement, noted her vigilance, and waited for the return of Mr. and Mrs. David, who rushed home pale as sheets. Mrs. David squeezed her so tightly that she gasped for breath and muttered, "Thank you for protecting them." By 12:30 a.m., the patrol cars had left. The parents insisted on personally driving her home. She agreed, but kept looking over her shoulder throughout the ride. At night, all the details of what she had experienced swirled in her head. How did he know about the children's dinner and the exact bedtime? Had he been peeking in the windows beforehand? Had he been eavesdropping on her conversations? Later, the Davids found a gap between the window frame and the lock. He had probably managed to break it before her arrival and was listening from the garden. He disappeared before the police arrived, suggesting either a signal scanner or animal instincts. Weeks passed before she dared to take on evening babysitting jobs again. When she did, she brought blackout film for the windows, replaced the unreliable latches with sturdy ones, and always kept a baseball bat close at hand. She learned that a calm tone and personal details are not always a guarantee of truthfulness. The detectives who got involved later revealed that similar men had been seen near elementary schools, where they picked up snippets of conversation for greater credibility. They believed that this type had targeted 3 houses that month, invariably hiding behind family ties. This brought no relief. On the contrary, it only highlighted the sophistication of his manipulative style. The case remains open, with no arrests. She still babysits, but only for trusted relatives, and never dismisses her gut feelings. Safety hangs by thin threads, locking the gate, not engaging in conversation with strangers, verifying backgrounds. That night, her decisions saved the situation. 2 little ones continued to doze under the soft blue light of the nightlight, undisturbed by the steps of an uninvited guest. There are nights when she wakes up to the echo of that quiet knock and even voice, begging for a child's blanket. He seems so patient, almost cordial, waiting for a moment of trust. Let no one succumb. No one will believe this story, but it still hangs in the air, giving no peace. Leah isn't one for ghost stories or wild fabrications, but the events of the past month still rob her of sleep. She's 32, working as a nurse at a small hospital in upstate New York. Her shifts often run late, and she drives home on deserted highways winding through forests and fields. On ordinary evenings, it brings peace. Just her faithful old Honda Civic, and the muted murmur of the radio. But that night, everything went wrong. The clock read around 11:30 p.m. when Leah, exhausted after a 12-hour shift, finally pulled out. The main highway, Route 12, was her usual route, a 2-lane strip with dense thickets of trees on either side, and occasional gas stations blinking in the darkness. Approaching a turn 5 miles from home, she noticed orange warning signs about construction and plastic cones blocking the way. A huge arrow pointed insistently to the left, onto a secondary road that Leah had never even heard of before. The sign was concise: detour, road work ahead. She sighed in annoyance, dreaming only of a hot shower and a soft bed. But there was no choice. She had to turn onto this narrow, unlit path. From the first few feet, the detour felt ominous, like a sinister labyrinth. The asphalt barely fit 2 cars side by side, and tree branches hung down on both sides, creating a feeling of being trapped. Not a single street light. Not a single light in the windows of houses, just solid blackness and the crunch of gravel under the wheels. Leah turned down the radio to concentrate better and gripped the steering wheel tighter, feeling her palms getting clammy. The road snaked and twisted, and she kept looking for signs of road work, a crew of workers in vests, rumbling equipment, or at least a pile of equipment. Nothing like that, just an endless succession of tree trunks and the steady hum of the engine echoing in the silence. After 10 minutes, a vague unease began to grow into anxiety in Leah's soul. Not a single oncoming car, the path seemed endless, like in a nightmare. The GPS signal kept disappearing and reappearing intermittently, refusing to give clear directions. Something's not right here, she whispered to herself, fighting the rising fear. At that moment, she glanced in the rearview mirror and saw it, a truck, 100 yards back, crawling forward at a snail's pace. Its headlights were off, blending into the night background. Her stomach twisted into a knot. Who in their right mind drives around in the dark without lights? Leah tried to convince herself that it was nothing, just a local resident on the same detour, hurrying about their business. However, the truck maintained its distance, neither approaching nor pulling away, like a shadow clinging to her tail. She pressed the gas pedal, trying to break away and escape this pursuit. It reacted instantly, also picking up speed. Leah's heart beat wildly, throbbing in her temples. To pull herself together, she mentally ran through explanations. Maybe their headlights had failed, or they were just as lost in this wilderness as she was. But then her gaze fell on the side of the road. There were no more construction signs. Not a single cone, no barricades, not even a trace of detour signs. Suddenly, the realization came. She hadn't noticed any work on Route 12 either. No excavators, no torn-up pavement. Just those mysterious signs and obstacles that had appeared out of nowhere. Panic washed over her in a wave, cold and clammy. Leah grabbed her phone to dial 911. There was no signal at all. In this wilderness, she was completely alone, cut off from the world. The truck stubbornly stayed behind, its silhouette in the mirror resembling a disembodied ghost, relentlessly following at her heels. She pressed down even harder on the accelerator, and the car shook on the potholes, protesting against such driving. It didn't fall behind by a single step. Now Leah could make out the details. It was a worn-out pickup truck, painted black or dark blue, and the figure of the driver was lost in the dimness of the cab. "Hang on, find a way onto the main road. Everything will be fine," she repeated to herself like a mantra. But the road continued to twist and turn, and she lost all sense of her location. Suddenly, a dim light flickered ahead, promising salvation. Headlights of an oncoming vehicle were approaching, cutting through the darkness. A wave of relief washed over Leah. It could be a patrol car or just a good Samaritan willing to help. As the SUV drew level, she slowed down and flashed her high beams twice, signaling distress. It turned out to be a white SUV. It also slowed down and pulled to the edge of the shoulder. Leah stopped, leaving the engine idling, and cracked the window just enough to call out, "Hey, I think someone's following me." The driver, a middle-aged man in thin-rimmed glasses, leaned out of the cab and asked, "Are you okay?" She pointed back. "There's a truck back there, no headlights. It's been chasing me for miles." He squinted, peering into the darkness behind her. The expression on his face changed instantly, becoming concerned. "There's no truck there." Leah turned sharply to the mirror. The road behind her was empty, as if it had never been there. Her blood ran cold. She could have sworn she had seen it just a second ago, clearly and closely. "Listen," the man said soothingly. "This road is full of strange things. I was also detoured here, but there were no repairs on the 12th. I checked myself. Drive behind me. I'll lead you back to the main road." Leah nodded silently, too stunned to argue or ask questions. She pulled up behind the SUV, keeping her eyes glued to the mirrors. Not a trace of the truck, just the bottomless darkness, swallowing up all traces. After 10 minutes, they finally burst onto Road 12. The orange signs and cones had vanished, as if they had never been placed at all, leaving only a vague memory. Leah thanked the man heartily. He promised to contact the police and report what had happened, and sped home, carefully locking all the locks. In her apartment, she couldn't close her eyes, running through the events in her mind, those sudden signs, the mysterious truck, its inexplicable disappearance. In the morning, she dialed the sheriff's office. They confirmed that no repairs had been planned on Route 12 that night. Not a single complaint of false detours. Leah dove into the internet and came across forums where others shared similar cases. Fake detours, mysterious cars leading nowhere. Some blamed it on someone's prank. Others whispered about something sinister, robbers or something worse lurking in the shadows. What exactly she saw, Leah doesn't know for sure. Maybe it was just a prank, or her tired mind played a trick on her. But the feeling of the clammy, unnatural presence of that road doesn't leave her, as if the highway harbored its own will, waiting for lonely travelers. Now Leah chooses a different route, even if it's longer, avoiding suspicious sections. And every time she sees a construction sign, her heart clenches with foreboding. She doubts she will ever feel safe driving alone again under the cover of night. When Leah was 15, she first met her future husband, who had just turned 16 in art class. Their small town didn't spoil teenagers just starting romantic relationships with a variety of entertainment, except for rare outings to the nearest Target for small purchases. The settlement, despite its modesty, had a special charm due to its rich past. Tourists came specifically to wander along the ancient mining trails or enjoy the views of the river that cut through the canyon nearby. This river, with its winding paths and panoramic vistas, served as the soul of the entire district, attracting both locals and visitors eager to immerse themselves in the embrace of a wild nature, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. Leah spent her childhood exploring the trails near the river. She walked and biked them countless times, memorizing every turn and hidden corner. This place was home, like an extension of her own garden behind the house, full of cozy secrets. Usually, it gave a feeling of complete security and peace, where the rustle of falling leaves merged with the soft splash of water, creating an atmosphere of serenity and harmony. She especially liked one of the paths, a half-mile trail leading to a modest bridge across the river. The bridge itself was not striking in scale, but it offered a mesmerizing view of the rushing water below, framed by the steep slopes of the canyon, where sunlight played on the surface, creating the illusion of eternal motion. It was there that Leah always felt a surge of lightness, as if time slowed down, allowing the world to unfold in all its beauty. Time seemed to stretch out, and the surrounding world slowed down. But nearby stood another bridge, far grander in scale and fame, one of the tallest on the planet, a true engineering masterpiece that attracted daredevils and curious tourists to its base. Walks in its vicinity opened up breathtaking panoramas of the canyon and the rushing river below. However, behind all this beauty hid a dark backstory. Over the decades, the bridge had become a sinister symbol, a point on the map where the lives of suicides ended all too often. The heavy imprint of these events hung in the atmosphere, like an invisible whisper about the dark side of this structure. The woman and her husband, looking for a light adventure, chose an evening stroll along the path to the small bridge around 6 p.m. The river lurked in a deep canyon, where the steep slopes absorbed the sun's rays long before dusk. The road was familiar, but from the first steps, she felt a vague excitement that she couldn't shake off. Twilight in the canyon was thickening faster than expected, the air filled with heaviness. The distance to the bridge was short, just half a mile, with a right turn leading directly to the crossing. However, the light was fading rapidly. The forest around was quieting down. The sounds that usually filled the space, the chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, gave way to an oppressive silence, full of foreboding. By the time they reached the turn to the bridge, there was absolute, pitch-black darkness. Although the clock showed about 7 p.m., the darkness was confusing, as if the canyon had closed in an embrace around the travelers. They lit the flashlights on their smartphones, thin beams cutting through the impenetrable blackness, but highlighting only a narrow circle under their feet. Everything else dissolved into oblivion. The woman's stomach clenched with a mounting inexplicable fear that grew in waves. This path was as familiar to her as the back of her hand. She had walked it dozens of times, but that night everything felt different, alien. She suggested turning back, but her husband, always more courageous or stubborn, insisted on continuing. Approaching a bend in the path, she suddenly stopped. Right 3 feet from the path, at the very beginning of the bridge, loomed a tall silhouette. The flashlight beam highlighted his back, and the woman's heart clenched. The figure seemed gigantic, at least 6-7 feet tall, with a powerful physique of 200 to 250 pounds. He was wearing a brown flannel shirt and dark pants, blue or black. Brown hair rose unnaturally, as if molded from clay rather than growing. However, it wasn't the size that caused horror. The proportions of the body seemed distorted, inhuman. The arms were elongated, hanging lower than usual as if belonging to an ape. The head was perfectly round, almost spherical, like a basketball mounted on the shoulders. The legs remained hidden in the darkness, which amplified the feeling of unreality. The silhouette stood motionless, staring down the slope into the complete darkness. The woman whispered to her husband. "What is that?" Her voice trembled. He also froze, not taking his eyes off the figure, holding his breath. The three of them froze in this tense, silent scene. 1 minute usually flies by unnoticed, but when your pulse is pounding in your temples and your instincts are screaming to run, it stretches on endlessly. The figure didn't stir, didn't react to their presence. The woman couldn't figure out if it was a human or something else. Thoughts swirled. How did he get here? There were no other cars on the trail. Why is he standing in pitch darkness, straying to the side, staring into the void? Why doesn't he turn around? Is he hiding his face, or what he's doing? The husband, gathering his courage, though his voice betrayed his excitement, called out firmly, "Hey, buddy, what are you doing here?" At that moment, the silhouette began to turn slowly, and the woman's stomach turned cold, nausea rising to her throat. The instinct she ignored earlier exploded with a shout, "Run, immediately!" She didn't wait to see his face. Grabbing her husband's hand, she darted back toward the car. The flashlight beam flitted in time with her steps. Her breath came in gasps. She never looked back. She didn't want to know if this creature was chasing them. Behind her, her husband shouted her name. His steps echoed. He was lagging noticeably behind. They burst out to the car, panting and shaking. The woman fumbled frantically with the keys. The parking lot was empty, not a single other car. The nearest town was 5 to 6 miles away, depending on the route, and the entire stretch of road was out of cell service. Her heart didn't calm down until the lights of the streetlights flickered into view. They barely spoke a word. Shock had tied their tongues. A few days later, curiosity outweighed fear. The woman couldn't get that silhouette out of her head. Was it a person, a joke, an illusion of light? She persuaded her husband to return during the day, bringing friends for backup. They needed to dispel their doubts. Maybe it was just a jacket on a pole, a bizarre boulder, or a prop from a local hoax. But there was nothing there. No pole, no clothing, not a single hint of an explanation. But what? She saw now sent a chill down her spine. The place where the silhouette had stood ended in a steep ledge, 4 feet down. If he was really standing there, then his height was not 6 to 7 feet, but closer to 8 to 10. The realization hit like a blow. What they had seen was not just tall, it was unimaginably huge. This river, this town, is steeped in a rich past. Some stories are full of charm, others of tragedy. Legends of mining times, lives cut short on the high bridge, the serene beauty of the canyon, all intertwined into a fabric, alive and almost sentient. What exactly they encountered that night remains a mystery. The woman shared the story with friends, relatives, anyone who would listen, but no one knew the answer. A person, a ghost, or something beyond. The memory of the motionless figure in the darkness doesn't let go. It's a fragment of the river's legacy that she will never solve, a mystery hovering like shadows in the canyon. For a long time she kept it secret. A year ago, silence seemed wiser. But now it's clear. It's useless to hide it. Someone may need a warning. He worked as a security guard at a small airport in Germany. Most flights took off in the pre-dawn hours, so his shifts were always at night. For 5 years, his service flowed monotonously, checking doors, verifying passes, monitoring cameras. Mid-July, the height of tourist season. Families with strollers, noisy groups with luggage, long lines at check-in counters. Despite this bustle, the terminal that night seemed distorted, wrong. He couldn't quite explain the feeling, so he just continued to perform his duties. Around midnight, he went out for a smoke. He went to the bakery, grabbed a chocolate bar and an energy drink, and sat down at a metal table. He was watching a short video on his phone when he felt an impulse to look back. Behind him stood a man in a black raincoat. The hood was pulled up, but his eyes were staring intently at him. His gaze didn't waver, no pretense of looking at the displays, just him, the watcher. The guard held out for a couple of seconds, then returned to the screen. Strange types in airports are a common, daily occurrence. The vast majority of them are harmless. AirTag. The vast majority of them are completely harmless. He finished half the can, slipped the phone into his pocket, and headed to the toilet to rinse his hands before the end of his break. Returning, he noticed the same man, now standing 50 meters away, in the main hall. The stranger's head was tilted, his gaze fixed on him again. As soon as the man realized he had been noticed, he turned and silently rushed into a side corridor, without a sound, without the slightest hesitation. A quiet alarm bell rang in his head, but nothing reprehensible had happened. He returned to his post and spent the next hours patrolling the gates, checking the locks, and waiting for the first rays of dawn. With the first rays of sun, his phone died. His house was nearby, so he just put the gadget in his pocket and set off. Halfway there, he remembered the power bank in his backpack, took it out, connected the cable, and continued walking. 10 minutes before arriving, he pressed the power button to look at the charge level. The screen suddenly filled with a foreign notification. Unknown AirTag detected. It is moving with you at a distance of 800 meters. He didn't have an AirTag. He froze in place. The street was empty. Only a row of dim lights cast a faint glow. A new alert. The distance had decreased to 600 meters, then to 500. He frantically searched for a rational explanation. Perhaps someone nearby had lost luggage with such a device. The numbers continued to fall inexorably. 400, 300. He broke into a run. The phone vibrated. 200 meters. He turned the corner and dashed forward. His legs felt like lead, numb with tension. But the distance was decreasing even faster. 100 meters. Finally, he burst into the entrance, inserted the key, slammed the door, and leaned against it. The hallway greeted him with a deathly silence. The screen showed 50 meters, then 20, 10. He pressed his eye to the peephole. The street remained deserted. His hands were shaking uncontrollably. He emptied his pockets and turned his backpack onto the floor. Nothing suspicious. He wanted to dial the police, but how to explain? The signal on the display supposedly indicated surveillance. In the end, he convinced himself that he was overtired. The shift had been exhausting. His mind was in a semi-sleep state. After changing, he collapsed into bed and started a video with a scary story on his phone. The narrator's voice usually lulled him to sleep. He only remembered the beginning, and then sleep finally overcame him. Later, he woke up in complete darkness. The video had ended, but the home screen was still flickering. A fresh notification appeared. Unknown AirTag detected. It is moving with you. Distance 2M. 2 meters. That's inside the room. He froze, unable to move. He locked the phone and the screen went dark. His eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness. At the foot of the bed, near the closet, loomed the silhouette of a man in a black raincoat. The same face, staring at him again. A hoarse cry escaped his throat. The stranger stepped back, threw open the door, and disappeared into the night before he could jump up. By the time the police arrived, the apartment was empty. No fingerprints, no tracker itself, just a wet footprint near the bed. The officers thoroughly searched the rooms, inspected the windows and the staircase. The doorframe remained untouched. He had the only key. They advised him to spend the night with relatives. He spent the night on his sister's couch, with the light on in the hallway and the phone set to motion detection. In the morning, he returned with a locksmith. They installed new reliable bolts and a camera above the door. Then, on the kitchen table, they turned over the contents of the backpack. In the lower seam of the inner pocket, under the lining, was hidden a white plastic disc smaller than a coin, an AirTag. Someone had skillfully cut the fabric, inserted the device, and sealed the seam so cleverly that the weight was not felt. That man had apparently come close to slip his hand into the bag unnoticed, either in the bakery or at the moment when he was distracted by the clock at the exit. The mystery remained unsolved. He keeps the tracker in a plastic evidence bag. The device lies on the table as a silent warning. A threat can disguise itself as commonplace and creep up from behind without a sound. He still works nights, but he doesn't walk home anymore. Every time the phone vibrates in his pocket, that impassive face flashes before his eyes, watching, waiting for the right moment. If your intuition tells you you're being followed, trust it and react without delay. He managed to get out. The next one may not be so lucky. He had always loved camping. The scent of pine needles, the crackle of a campfire, the forest stillness, it all made him feel truly alive. Last summer, he and his friends, Jake, Matt, and Amber, planned a weekend in Blackwood Forest, a dense pine forest 2 hours from the city. It was a popular but vast place, with miles of trails and thickets where sunlight barely penetrated the canopy. They had camped there before, so they weren't particularly worried. However, this time was etched in his memory forever. Months later, he still woke up in a cold sweat, remembering Jake. They arrived in Blackwood on Friday afternoon, the 4 of them crammed into Matt's beat-up Jeep. The air outside was warm, but the forest was cool. They set up camp by a stream in a secluded spot away from the main trail in a clearing with a ready-made fire pit from previous visitors. Jake was in high spirits, cracking jokes, tossing a soccer ball around while Amber set up the tent. He was always the life of the party, the one to diffuse the atmosphere with laughter, even when things were tense. Matt, more reserved, was already tinkering with the campfire while he unloaded the cooler, soda, hot dogs, and other usual snacks. Twilight thickened quickly. By 9 o'clock, it was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face without a flashlight. They settled down by the fire, roasting marshmallows, exchanging funny stories. Jake started talking about an ancient Blackwood legend. In the 80s, people disappeared there without a trace. Amber snorted, declaring it typical campfire nonsense, and everyone laughed. But he caught Jake glancing at the trees every now and then, as if sensing someone's presence. Close to 11, Jake announced that he was going for a walk. His usual excuse, to pee and check out the stream. He grabbed a flashlight. Amber reminded him not to go far, but he waved her off. "I'm not a kid, Mom." Classic Jake, cocky but harmless. No one paid much attention. The stream was only 100 yards away. Its splashing could be heard in the camp. Minutes dragged on, 10, 20. Amber began to get nervous, looking at her phone every now and then. "He's probably just messing around," Matt muttered, though his voice sounded uncertain. He grabbed a flashlight and called out, "Jake, stop kidding around." His voice echoed, swallowed by the trees. Silence. His stomach went cold. Blackwood is huge, but not endless. Jake couldn't have gone that far. They decided to organize a search. Amber stayed at the camp in case he returned, while Matt and he split up. He headed to the stream, sweeping the beam through the bushes. The flashlight pulled roots and boulders from the darkness, but not his friend. He called out his name every few steps, his voice fading. The forest seemed deathly silent. No chirping crickets, no hooting owls, only the crunch of his boots on the carpet of pine needles. His boot crunched on pine needles, echoing in the dense silence of the forest. The narrator expected to see his friend's familiar grin, to hear his signature joke that could diffuse any tension. However, with each step, the situation worsened, as if the forest was tightening its grip. By the stream, he stumbled upon Jake's flashlight. It was lying in the mud, still on, the beam pointing at the dense ferns. His heart clenched. Jake was never sloppy. He didn't leave things to chance. Picking it up, the narrator shouted louder, but the echo only mockingly returned with emptiness. An examination of the area revealed footprints in the mud. Jake's boot prints led to the water, and then abruptly stopped, as if he had vanished into thin air halfway. His voice broke as he called Matt. He rushed over, and seeing the flashlight, instantly turned pale, his face contorted with horror. The search dragged on for hours. Amber joined them, her voice hoarse from shouting and anxiety. They combed the stream, the paths, returned to the camp. Maybe he had just gotten lost in this web of trees. By 2 in the morning, everyone was exhausted, but they didn't give up, stubbornly moving forward. Amber burst into tears, blaming herself. She shouldn't have let him go alone on such a night. Matt muttered encouraging words, assuring that Jake was okay, just lost somewhere nearby. But the narrator felt that there was something sinister here. The air seemed thick, saturated with threat, and the forest, a living guardian, watching every movement vigilantly. At dawn, when the first rays broke through the canopy, they called the police. There was a ranger station nearby, and they quickly assembled a search team, experienced rangers, tracking dogs, and even a helicopter for aerial surveillance. They presented the flashlight and the tracks, answered questions. Had Jake been acting strangely? Had he left on purpose? No, that's just Jake, they assured. Funny, a little silly, but always full of adventurous spirit. The rangers nodded, though their eyes betrayed suspicion of the worst-case scenario. Blackwood Forest had a grim reputation. People disappeared here, though not often, but inevitably. Hikers, campers, even locals. Some were found safe and sound. while others were never seen again. Days flowed into one another. The search efforts grew. Volunteers, additional dogs, drones to scan hard-to-reach areas joined in. The group stayed at the campsite, barely closing their eyes, helping as much as they could. Amber went into hysterics, endlessly blaming herself for that fateful night. Matt fell silent, staring into the endless wall of trees, as if his gaze could magically bring his friend back. The narrator, on the other hand, mentally reviewed the events of that night. Jake's strange look at the forest before leaving, the sudden silence after his step, the break in the tracks at the stream. All this didn't fit into a logical picture, like a puzzle with missing pieces. The Rangers found nothing suspicious. Not a scrap of clothing, not a drop of blood, no signs of a struggle. They thoroughly checked the caves, ravines, and abandoned forest roads, but all in vain. The dogs, like the human tracks, lost the thread at the stream, as if the scent had evaporated into nowhere. One of the Rangers, an older and seasoned man, took the narrator aside and said with a heavy sigh, "Sometimes people just disappear without explanation. Blackwood is treacherous. It has too many nooks and crannies." These words hit like a slap. He wanted to object, even hit, but the reality was cruel. Jake wasn't just lost, he had disappeared, as if swallowed by the very essence of the forest. Weeks stretched into months. Search operations were scaled down. The police stated that the case remained open, but in reality, they gave up, putting it on the back burner. Amber couldn't take it and left for the city, where she was trying to start over. He and Matt stopped communicating, meeting him only resurrected pain and memories. The narrator sometimes returned to Blackwood alone, went to that stream, stood where the tracks ended, peering into the water and the grass. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, a sign, a clue, or at least comfort. Reading online articles about people who disappeared in forests like Jake. Without a trace, he came across theories. Some blamed bears or cougars, but then there would be signs of a struggle. Others talked about sinkholes or hidden caves, although the Rangers had checked all this. On the internet, there were posts about the paranormal, strange lights in the canopy, whispering voices luring into the depths. The narrator didn't believe in such things, but at night, alone, his thoughts swirled. What if Jake saw something forbidden? Was he followed by a forest spirit? Dreams about Jake haunted him. In one, he was standing by the stream, smiling as if everything was okay, peaceful and serene. But as soon as he got closer, his face distorted, became empty, alien, not Jake, but something else, waking up in a panic, covered in sweat. The narrator realized the truth would remain a mystery. Will he ever know? Unlikely. But one thing was clear, he would never go camping in Blackwood again. The forest had already taken a friend, and the narrator wouldn't let it take him too. It all started with a guy named Isaiah, whom the narrator met as a landscaper a year ago. For context, it's worth noting that the narrator himself was also involved in landscaping, hence this story. He worked at a company where a lot of problems had accumulated. He won't name it. They risk being sued for disclosure. The meeting with Isaiah took place at the dump, where the narrator had come to drop off a trailer. As the driver and foreman, he often took care of such matters. Isaiah approached him. They talked about work, nothing unusual at first glance. He said that he had been in the landscaping business for only a year and dreamed of starting his own business. He handed out business cards to the narrator and his crew, but he didn't pay attention. He already had enough orders. A year passed. The narrator was fired, and he remembered the business card. He called, asked for a job. Isaiah hadn't.